Thanks, Manish, for giving me this opportunity. Well, I know that 15 minutes too big a time, too small a time to talk everything about TV spine evaluation and management. But what I will do, I'll just spend few minutes in the diagnosis and some of the tips which the postgraduate student must express in the examination. Well, we all know that it is an extrapulmonary tuberculosis, and as extrapulmonary, it is paucibacillary. So, paucibacillary causes has its problem of lower bacteriologic diagnosis and source detection rate, and that's the reason why we have a little difficulty establishing ascertaining the diagnosis in a spinal or extrapulmonary tuberculosis. And out of all, 50% is spinal tuberculosis. Now, if you look at the pathogenesis of disease, the disease starts as inflammation to the vertebral body, and that goes on to produce bone loss, bone destruction, to spinal deformity and neural complication. So this is the sequence of pathology, pathogenesis of the disease. Now, whenever you want to diagnose on clinical and on X-ray ground, where the classical clinical finding of a paraspinal tenderness, kyphotic deformity, some cold abscesses with or without neural deficit, and a classical X-ray finding which has been described as osteopenia, obliteration, reduction, and destruction of the disc spaces, and a kyphotic deformity, prevertebral shadows, space increase in the prevertebral space, and the paravertebral shadows. So when you diagnose clinically in a with a deformity, probably we are already very late, and patient must be symptomatic for at least 3 to 6 to 9 months. That is why probably now we have to understand the pathogenesis of disease and move on making an early diagnosis where this classical radiological picture is not there. We have to diagnose it before a obvious deformity and a neural deficit. So for that, suspicion has to be clinical and clinico-radiological. Any patient with persistent back pain, localized back pain for 3 months or more, with or without tenderness or spasm, with or without constitutional symptom, and with maybe subtle radiological sign or without subtle radiological sign, is something which we need to evaluate by for sure by imaging. And well, in olden time it used to be multiple imaging, but now MRI is the gold standard. So these patients must be subjected for an must be put for an MRI evaluation. Now this is what I was talking, that it starts as inflammation and gradually the disc starts herniating into the inflamed vertebral body with the damage to subchondral bone. And as the disease continues, this destruction and inflammation continues, the whole disc herniates into the disease inflamed bone, and later on the anterior bone loss takes place, and that is how the kyphosis starts appearing, and the diseased tissue enters into the spinal canal to produce a neural deficit. Now this keep this pathogenesis in mind. Patient starts presenting with some pain at this point of time when the inflammation has started, with or without constitutional symptom. Further pain increases, local signs starts appearing, and if further ignored, then kyphos appeared or neural deficit appear, and it takes time. So now, if at this point of time you are able to get some X-ray finding like that, reduction in disc spaces, then we are more or less far sure that probably there is a definitely some underlying destructive disease or inflammatory or infective disease underlying. However, and that is why on this clinical imaging predictor, if you get all imaging, then we should be able to localize the lesion. We should be able to identify and diagnose the condition. Now, in the present time, all imaging are generally not used, so MRI remains the gold standard. So a presumptive case with a persistent finding of localized pain, and if these are subtle X-ray finding of increased localized prevertebral shadow and some straightening of spine or reduction of disc spaces, we should be able to diagnose with the MRI before a kyphotic deformity appears. And if you fail to subject and diagnose at this point of time, then I'm sure in some more weeks or in some more months, this kind of a classical radiological picture is going to come up. And that is what I was trying to, that if we understand the pathogenesis of disease, then we are able to diagnose before a classical deformity or neural deficit appears. Now, when an MRI has been done, then these are the findings which are very important. These patients, they have a contiguous vertebral body involvement. You could see these 5, 6 vertebral body. Well, on X-ray, you may see 2 or 3 vertebral body, but 3 or more vertebral body may be inflamed. So contiguous vertebral body involvement, relative preservation of disc spaces, subligamentous extension, which is low signal in T1 and a bright in T2 weighted images, with large pre and paravertebral abscesses, which are septated. You could see this septated paravertebral abscesses, intraosseous abscesses, and epidural involvement. Now, with the constellation of these findings, we are now more or less 90% sure that we are dealing with a case of tuberculosis of spine. However, this is what is a clinical imaging diagnosis. Now, this is another example I'm putting here. Patient is symptomatic, and if you could see, there is a reduction in the disc spaces, and this vertebral body has anterior vertebral body erosion. This is another body which has erosion, and the MRI finding. You could see these are the contiguous vertebral body involvement, and this is the subligamentous collection, which is septated here. You could see bright in T2, low signal in T1, and intraosseous lesion. So now we are more or less sure, and this patient, we ascertained the diagnosis bacteriologically as well. So with these findings, in almost 90% instances, we are able to make a confident diagnosis. Now, on the contrary, if you have a heterogeneous signal with some normal intervening vertebral body, now these are not the patient or MRI picture to be taken as tuberculosis by all means. The differential diagnosis here, it's going to be sinister conditions like myeloma, multiple myeloma, lymphoma. So hence, we must take biopsy in all such cases. There is no place for empiric treatment as starting empiric ATT. Now, we have made a clinical suspicions, or we have done an imaging. So we have to ascertain the diagnosis either by some way, whether by MRI where you have a classical finding. If not, then tissue, open or percutaneous biopsy. And once you have taken a tissue, then microbiological, molecular or histological diagnosis must be done. I think this is a very important slide which I'm just going to show, and this slide is there in one of the recent clinical current concept review which has been published in Journal Bone Joint Surgery American April issue. If you look at this triangle, then culture is the gold standard, which to ascertain the diagnosis in tuberculosis. And as I said, we are dealing with a paucibacillary. So in best of the lab, chances of getting a bacterial growth is somewhere between 30 to 50% in a virgin case. And that all depends on the quality of lab. Now, the next in hierarchy comes molecular method, which may be gene experts, line probe assay. Well, I've written data is not known, but now this data, some data has emerged in some of the series, and even we are likely to submit for publication one of the consecutive series of cases where molecular methods, gene experts and line probe has not only improved our diagnostic accuracy, but is also able to suggest or indicate if there is any drug resistance to rifampicin or rifampicin and INH in line probe is there. Now coming to FB smear, which is little lower than these two, and here again 10 to 30% instances we are able to demonstrate organism. Then the next is histological diagnosis. Now there are two kind of reports we get, as consistent and suggestive. Now if you get an granuloma proper and all other findings, then it is a consistent with tuberculosis. However, if the granuloma is not there, caseating granuloma is not there, then in that case, it is always a suggestive. So 60% is, if you take 100 histology, then 60% are consistent, while 35% are suggestive. So these four methods are able to, if done all simultaneously, then we are able to ascertain the diagnosis in a paucibacillary spinal lesion in almost 100% instances, because each of the method is having some percentage of positivity. Now here, if you could see that radiological and imaging studies, clinical suspicion and therapeutic response to ATT, they are very low. And that is why confirmation, ascertaining a diagnosis in osteoarticular or spinal tuberculosis is a hierarchical diagnosis where you have to put everything together. Never rely on treating them on a clinical suspicion alone, or a only therapeutic response alone, or only imaging or and radiologically, unless your MRI finding are characteristic. Now, coming to the treatment, I think one thing is sure, that mainstay of treatment is a prolonged, continuous multi-drug therapy, and surgery is indicated in certain individual correct cases. Type of surgery, whether the patient has paraplegia or not a paraplegia, TB spine in children, granulomas, or late onset paraplegia, these are the conditions which require individualized approach. Now, this treatment of tuberculosis has evolved after a BMRC study on 750 patients by British Medical Research Council between 1950 to 75, where 2 to 3 drugs, bed rest or ambulant, radical clearance or conservative, radical clearance or debridement were compared in different parts of the world. And it was reported that there is no difference on healing. There were many lacunae, but at least this study has conclusively proved that it is a medical disease to be treated medically. Now, evolution of drug therapy, there are many issues. What are the drugs? What are the volumes? What are the regimen, whether intermittent or daily dose? How long it should be treated? Is there any regimen difference in children? And failure to drug therapy. So these are the 5 questions which are put to students and put to our clinical practice every day in a different clinical situation. Now, rationality of this is ATT is a multi-drug, because in a lesion there are various kind of organism. Some are extracellular, rapidly dividing, acted upon by INH, streptomycin, ethambutol. Some of them are extracellular, slowly or intermittently dividing. They were acted upon by rifampicin. Some are intracellular, intermittently dividing. They are pyrazinamide. And some of them are the dormant bacilli where no drugs act. And since there are the cluster or collection of organisms have a different division and hence acted by different drugs, and that is why it is a multi-drug combination to be given as ATT. Now, next is intermittent or daily doses. And the doses, the current drug combination is rifampicin, INH, ethambutol, pyrazinamide for 2 months. After that, pyrazinamide can be withdrawn. Streptomycin, rifampicin, INH, and ethambutol to be continued in the maintenance phase for whole duration. Well, it used to be 2 drugs 3-4 years ago, but INH resistance has been demonstrated in some part of India, particularly in Gujarat, and that is why all treatment protocols now include rifampicin, INH, and ethambutol as a maintenance. Now, the next was, should we give an intermittent or daily doses? Well, this intermittent or daily doses, both are scientific. Intermittent acts on lag effect, where if the bacteria is put to some drug concentration in the blood, then bacteria undergoes suppression. And even if the drug is withdrawn, bacteria takes 24 hours to reactivate, 24 to 48 hours. And that was the rationale of lag effect. However, and that is why 3 times per week were advocated to improve the compliance, and so as to make it possible that this could be a supervised chemotherapy. However, the problem with intermittent doses was that if some dose is missed, then it becomes inadequate treatment, and that was the risk of emergence of drug resistance. So now all guidelines have says that it has to be daily doses regimen. So there is no confusion, no controversy. It is daily doses regimen. Short course or long course? Yes, this is still an unresolved issue. There are various groups to talks about 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and this all is because of pulmonary has recommends short course regimen, because there you are able to demonstrate bacterial sterility of pulmonary lesion by sputum, repeated sputum examination, and then you give 4 months ATT, and that's good enough. However, in a bone and joint tuberculosis, it is difficult to demonstrate when the lesion becomes bacteriologically sterile. And that is why the opinion is divided between 6, 9, and 12 months, because our healed status used to be completion of regimen, whatever pulmonary group gave, and no recurrence for 2 years. And this duration of treatment, in a review of literature, we find that there is a lack of consensus what constitute healed status in the literature. So the work is going on to define what is the end point of treatment. And when the contrast MRI was taken to decide the end point of treatment, what we found is that not all lesions we could demonstrate. 35% lesion patients achieving healed status at 8 months, 60% at 12 months, 90% at 18 months. And that is why we recommended that it is unscientific to stop ATT by fixed time schedule. Lesion must heal. So then, and this is the example you could see here. This is the lesion which is completely resolved on MRI. And this is the lesion and which is completely resolved on MRI. But then the persistent bone edema on a contrast MRI was an issue, because this edema could be an inflammation of bone, or it could be a disease per se. And this inflammation, this persistent bone edema was to be resolved. So that is why MRI evaluated lesions were overtreated. So then we again monitored with PET scan, and we concluded, and these were all histologically and bacteriologically proven cases. And what we could see that again, all those same findings were, we were able to ascertain that there were some patients showing healing at a shorter time, while others showing healing at a longer time. But PET scan was able to cut short and demonstrate healed lesion earlier than the MRI scan. But one thing what we concluded, if there is any chance stainless steel implant, then PET remains the only method to demonstrate healed status. So again, we concluded that you have to treat any spinal TB lesion till healed status is demonstrated by contrast MRI or PET scan. And this is one example. This is a classical radiologically diagnosed cervical spine lesion. And this is the classical MRI findings. So I'll just, due to paucity of time, they will not describe the finding again. And this is the radiological healing. You could see that radiological healing has started appearing. And this is on MRI also in T1 weighted. It has, the body has become brightened, so fat necrosis has taken place. And at 10 months, PET scan demonstrated no activity, and the ATT was stopped in this particular patient in that series at 10 months time. So the regimen is 4 drugs for 2 months, 3 drugs for 10 months, daily doses. Closely monitoring is to be done for development or progression of neural deficit, and all those patients who require surgical intervention to be intervened. Total duration 12 months, extendable up to 18 months on case-to-case basis if you are not able to demonstrate attainment of healed status. Now children, the same drugs is to be given. The only thing is that you have to calculate ATT volume of the drug based on the weight of the child. Every child has to be, ATT has to be customized. And another important thing, that these children, once they are put on ATT, they gain weight. So that on every visit by at least 2 months, every 2 months, you have to ensure that your ATT doses are adjusted. Now, the last in drug therapy is a failure of drug therapy. And this is all because of development of suspicion of a drug resistance, which I'll just talk a minute later. Now, with neural complication, early onset or paraplegia with the active disease, and the late onset paraplegia with healed disease. Now, in early onset, it is the compression which is causing the paraplegia by disease, mechanical compression or instability, while in late onset paraplegia, it is not the activity of disease, rather it is a long-term changes into the spinal cord as a result of the sequelae of severe kyphosis. Now, surgical treatment, it is very difficult to talk about in detail, but indications are when you are operating for a neural deficit, or you are operating for instability, impending neurological deficit due to a panvertebral disease where the body and the posterior complex simultaneously disease, or a long segment disease where after decompression you have to span the graft is need to be spanned by instrumentation, or when a deformity correction is to be contemplated in active disease, particularly in children where we have a severe kyphotic deformity and where you are suspecting a drug resistance. You want to procure tissue to submit for a demonstration of resistance, and that is why presumptive drug resistance is an indication of surgery. And late onset paraplegia, because here the sequelae of kyphotic deformity, if you don't intervene, then spinal cord further further will be damaged, and that neural deficit will be non-recoverable. Now, instrumentation, yes, there was some controversy, but now instrumentation indications have been defined, that in a panvertebral lesion where body as well as posterior complex is disease, you have to instrument the spine. Large post-debridement defect, if you have decompressed this kind of a long segment, then graft need to be protected, or a severe kyphotic deformity is corrected, because there you have to do a posterior column shortening as well, then it has to be instrumented. And TB of junctional area, because it has a severe repercussion on the progression of kyphotic deformity and development of neural deficit, and hence it is advisable to instrument the junctional area lesions. Instrumentation type could be of any kind, and that all depends on availability, that depends on the number of vertebral body, that depends whether what is the bone health, where say for example, here we did the pedicle system, while doing the pedicle screw on the upper part, the pus started coming out, so we modified into the upper part is just taken as a hard shell, and here the whole hard shell was given. So all instrumentation of all works well if correct principle of instrumentation is used. And here again you could see such a long segment disease, and here this you could see the destruction of so many number of vertebral body, so spanning some the posterior complex of some vertebrae, leaving some, and then again. So you have to plan the instrumentation depending on the type of case. Spinal deformity is very important. As I said, if the spinal deformity heals with 60 degree or more, there are more chances of late onset paraplegia. So it is easier to correct spinal deformity in active disease. You need to identify, you need to see the natural history of that particular kyphotic, whether it is going to be progressive or not, and then you take for deformity correction. And the principle are, whenever a patient is taken for deformity correction, you have to do anterior corpectomy, you have to do a posterior column shortening, and when both are done, instrument the spine, you have to do anterior gap grafting and posterior fusion. So this all have to be done simultaneously. This is a difficult surgery, this is a complicated surgery, labor intensive, and it has to be done by only those who are well trained and who are regularly doing it.
Dr. Anil, we are exceeding time. We are very short.
I'll just finish in a minute.
Yeah.
I think drug resistance again. We have, what I mean by drug resistance. Now this was TB lesion, and at 9 months the lesion is the same. So there has to be something wrong with this patient, and that is why these are presumptive drug resistance cases. And here line of action is that take tissue, submit for histology for diagnosis, take smear, genotypic analysis, and gene experts, LPA, and a culture to prove drug resistance. I think I will not talk about the drug treatment of drug resistance, because it itself is a big lecture, but there are certain principles that you have to read, and I'll just recommend one of my article on this, and you read that, and that these are the various definition of drug resistance. And these are more toxic drugs. They are used in higher number. You have to use certain those drugs which are less potent, but then you have to use, because that's the only way you are going to eliminate, cure the patient from tuberculosis. Now, these are the various regimen being prescribed for 1 drug resistance, 2 drug resistance, but then prevention of drug resistance is the key, and that's what you can do by monitoring the first instance when you are treating, monitor the drug resistance drug treatment properly, so that there is no drug compliance is good at first instance. Well, in children, deformity progresses very rapidly because these are soft cartilaginous bone, and hence they have to be diagnosed early. Otherwise, in 2 to 3 months' time, they can develop such a grotesque deformity. And that is why, and this deformity progresses with growth, because even after tuberculosis healed status is achieved, this deformity is likely to progress with the growth. And that is why, and these are the severe kyphotic deformity, which may end up, some of them, with the late onset paraplegia, and they need to be corrected at first at the wet state when the lesion is active. Otherwise, these kind of a severe deformity, you are going to end up in a severe kyphotic deformity. Had it been treated at this stage when the lesion is active, this surgery would have been simpler. But with the late onset or with the healed kyphotic deformity, it becomes a difficult proposition. So friends, so we have to suspect early and treat early. Diagnosis must be ascertained at all costs. Treat adequately till healed status is achieved. Surgery, individualized indication. Drug resistance is a menace to be prevented, and children be little aggressive to make diagnosis and treat. I think these are the 3 suggested reading. This is again a article in JBJS British, and this is an American. If anyone wants PDF, because this has not come. Any students can drug, which is a very comprehensive article to give all insight onto the postgraduates. And in this book, there are 200 questions for the postgraduates, and the questions have been answered as if it's being put to the postgraduate student, and what you face in your clinical practice while treating a patient. So these 200 to 300 questions have been answered with the reference. So these are the suggested